All right, great. Thank you, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on a Saturday. I know you all have very, very busy lives, and especially for parents who might be in the room today, knowing that children are about to go back to school. I just went to one of the first backpack giveaways at the Housing Authority over at Egbert in the Bayview. And it was a great turnout, so many families coming out. So I hope that today is worth the time that you're spending with us. My name is Joaquin Torres, and I am your elected Assessor-Recorder here in the City and County of San Francisco. Thank you very much. What I want you to think about right now is what is it that you want to walk away with today? In terms of information, I know that once the doors open at 9 a.m., there were already individuals who were reaching out to my staff saying, how do I deal with this situation? And I realize I need to slow down. How do I deal with this particular circumstance that I have around my property? And we are occupying 3 floors here in City College today, where we will be able to have both presentations here in this room, individual consultations with my staff on the 2nd floor, and then, of course, additional presentations that will take place on the 3rd floor. Before we go any further, again, I want to say what I want you to walk away with is maybe it's answering a question around your property assessment, which Rick and I just talked about a few moments ago, connecting you to one of the many nonprofits or city departments that are sitting around the tables right now or in the hallway, providing more education around a topic that you care about, whether it's pursuing an accessory dwelling unit like an ADU, or perhaps dealing with financial scams that might be taking place in our communities and knowing what to be aware of. That in the future might save you some money, might save you some time, might save you some heartache. That's why we're here today, to build awareness, to provide resources, and to answer your questions. I really very much want to thank City College today for making this space available to us. We'll hear from in a moment from one of City College's trustees, Aliyah, who is here with us this morning. Aliyah, who's here with us this morning. And of course, I want to thank DeMay's Catering for providing the pastries and coffee that are outside. Please, we're in this time of recovery, economic recovery, moving through this pandemic, and our small businesses continue to need our support. So please do support them in this neighborhood, up and down Ocean Avenue, and all around the neighborhoods in the city. So for those of you who don't already know, the core role of my office is fair and accurate appraisal and valuation of all real property in San Francisco. It contributes to the financial stability of our city, and it provides the essential funding for all the city services that are important for us here in the city and county of San Francisco. But it's important for me not just that we talk about the role that those resources play for government, but what role those resources play to all, what those resources mean to all of you, what they mean to all of you. Focusing on community, which is why we're here today. We want to make sure that we're present with you and meeting you where you are at, as one of our core principles in the Office of the Assessor-Recorder. And I really want to thank all of the staff who are here with us today, who have been greeting you, who have been guiding you, and who've helped put on this production. So thanks you to all the staff for making time on this Saturday as well. This is a complement to what we do year-round in terms of being the assessor in the neighborhood. Whether we're popping up at libraries, please do follow us on, I guess, X, on Instagram, on Facebook, or simply sign up for our newsletter so you can find out where we're going to be in community. The intention is to be available like we are today to answer those questions. It's homes that keep people in San Francisco, and we don't want to see more communities lose them, which is why we're providing some of the investment basics and also some topics that can help you think about how to build and protect those assets that are most important to you. Before we move on, I want to take a moment to introduce some special guests that we have here today. One of my colleagues, we are part of what we like to call the 3-legged stool in the city and county of San Francisco. Myself with the Assessor-Recorder's office, the Treasurer and Tax Collector, Jose Cisneros, and our Controller's office, Ben Rosenfield, who really ensure that we are stable and secure as a city. And so I would like to invite our Treasurer and Tax Collector, Jose Cisneros, who has done so much work around financial empowerment and has been an inspiration to me in producing programs like this.
Hello. I'm thrilled to be here. I was actually here in 2017 when Joaquin's predecessor kicked off this effort, and I'm very proud of the fact that you have now, post-pandemic, brought us back together here in person to be able to help people in our community. As Joaquin said, it is vitally important that the city employees, the city offices, the city government do everything we can to help everybody here in San Francisco. We have many challenges here. We have a very high cost of living. We have a lot of pressures that people are experiencing. And we, the city, and I'm all my comrades from all city departments that are here, want to make sure that everybody here has every opportunity to be successful. As Joaquin said, we see far too many people feeling like they're being forced out of the city, and that is not what we want to see happen. We want our city to remain very diverse, to remain a place where people can be successful. And to that end, I want to announce that we have been invited, thank you, Assessor Torres, to invite even some of our staff here to help folks today. One of the services we provide is individual one-on-one financial coaching. We call it Smart Money Coaching, and our representatives providing that service are right out in the hallway. If you want to speak one-on-one, very privately with anybody about your financial situation, take a look at your credit report, see what things might be able to be fixed or improved. We are here to help you do that for as many sessions as it takes, and you can meet our folks outside and find a way to sign up for that kind of work. With that, I just want to thank you, Joaquin, for making this incredible event happen, and we're always here to partner with you going forward. Thanks a lot.
Gracias, Jose. We also have tabling with us today. The controller herself could not be here. She's down serving some constituencies in the southern part of California right now, which is, depending on who you're asking today, California represents the 5th or 4th largest economy in the world. And we're very lucky to have joining us for a few moments right now is Deputy Controller Habsib. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Assessor Torres, for the introduction. I'm just so excited to be here at the Family Wealth Forum. And I want to thank you, Assessor Torres, for hosting such an incredible and successful event. I've been working with Assessor Torres for quite a few years now, and I'm happy to call him a dear friend. I just also want to appreciate you for the advocacy you're doing here in San Francisco on behalf of all of us, and also in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. I see him everywhere, and he's working hard for all of us. So a little bit about myself, and I want to thank you for the introduction. My name is Hasib Emran. I'm the California Deputy State Controller to Controller Malia Cohen, who could not be here today, but she did send her best wishes. So as the Deputy Controller, my specific policy area is taxation, and taxation is so important. I say on the California State Board of Equalization, it's the only elected tax board in the country, and we're working on a lot of issues that affect family wealth, that affect intergenerational wealth, including Proposition 19, including something that we kicked off as a workforce planning for making sure that there's auditors and appraisers in the pipeline that represent all our community, because we know that a fair appraisal is the way to build equity. And for families, especially Black and brown families, it's so important to have a home that's fairly assessed, that's fairly equitable, because it's something that you can pass down to your family. And that's an example of myself. A little bit about my background. I'm an attorney. I'm a family of refugees. I was my first generation. And something that my parents did is that they bought a house 20 years ago. And I'm happy to announce that this year we actually paid it off in full. And we're homeowners, officially homeowners. And that's my parents' legacy. And it's something they can pass on to me and my two brothers. And I'm so proud of that. And this is what we're here today, to build intergenerational wealth, because building intergenerational wealth sets you up for the future, sets up our kids. Because a lot of times the treasurer has said is like, we feel like we're being squeezed out, and we feel like we don't have that head start. And I think it's important. We're not going to sit on the sidelines anymore. We want our piece of the pie, right? And I think that's so important, to build this knowledge, to build the wealth, build the diversity, because it really is, diversity is our strength and unity is our power, especially in such a beautiful city like this. So once again, I'm so excited to be here, and thank you, Assessor Torres, for all your amazing work.
Thank you so much, Deputy Controller Emran. I'm so grateful for the partnership. Again, I know there's a lot of talking right now in the beginning, but the message I hope you're getting is that there are faces connected to the offices that you need to do business with at times, so that you know that you can reach out to us and our staff and departments that are here in the room that can be of service to you. so that we truly are accessible to you. We're much closer than you think in this very, very small 7x7 square mile city and county, surrounded by a lot of different realities. So with that, we have another special guest today, City College trustee Alia Chisti, who wants to just say a few words. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, everybody. I am so excited to be here. I am Alia Chisti. I am one of the trustees at City College of San Francisco. I feel like I live here at this point because this is where we have our board meetings, and we were just here Thursday. So I'm so excited to see you all. I was born and raised in San Francisco. I grew up the street. And so City College is home to me. It's a community college, and community colleges were previously called People's College. So I am so excited to share this space with Assessor Torres, and I'm so thankful that you chose City College to host this really important event. And I want to tie the intersection of education and wealth, right? Investing in education is such an important asset. And so we do have free City College. So we are tabling here. I encourage you all to consider also enrolling at City College. If you are a San Francisco resident, your tuition is free. And so investing in education is so incredibly important. And we initially also just waived student debt for our students. So we also know the intersection of debt and how it can impact wealth. So super excited for that. I'm really, really happy to be here. Thank you again for hosting this. Come to City College and continue to invest in yourself, in education, property, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Alia. All right, now we're going to move on to the agenda. I want to provide you with the overview for the rest of today. May I see the next slide? All right. We've talked a little bit about the Family Wealth Forum. I'm going to go into that a bit more fully in terms of what the programming will be, in terms of 4 presentations that we will have over the next couple of hours. They're going to range in time, but probably around 30 minutes per presentation, with the exception of something a little bit shorter in what I present around the role of bias in appraisal that I want homeowners to be aware of when it comes to working in the private appraisal market. I'm going to talk a little bit about my office so you have an understanding of this mystery of what is the Assessor-Recorder. When I first walked into City Hall, there are people who've been working in the city who still have no idea what Jose and I do, but we do extraordinarily benefit your lives and the lives of San Franciscans throughout the city. And then we'll move on to the first presentation of bias in the private appraisal market, as I mentioned. Next slide, please. Overall, we're going to be, again, working on both the first floor, second floor, and third floor. Once we conclude with the first presentation, we'll move on, hopefully, in the next 10 minutes, over into home improvements and ADU considerations around accessory dwelling units for those that might want to be considering those in terms of helping us move forward towards creating more housing in San Francisco in a much more simplified manner, to a degree. And I really want to thank Habitat for Humanity, the San Francisco Planning Department, San Francisco Department of Building Inspection, and of course, my office for being here today to help support that presentation. Then on the third floor, an hour later, we're going to have investing basics, and we're very honored that BlackRock is joining us today to help provide that presentation. When I was on Spanish language media yesterday, one of the questions that was asked was, well, you're having a conversation about homeowners. How does that apply to everyone? You're talking about building intergenerational wealth. How are people supposed to even be considering that, given what the costs are to make it in San Francisco, to live in San Francisco, or for someone like me who is a renter to even think about how am I going to sustain myself and my family moving forward in the city and county? And that's why I wanted them here, because no matter where you're at, there is always an opportunity to think about investing from the most fundamental levels at any age, and with any dollar amount that you can begin thinking about that. And BlackRock is going to be talking about that today, and I very much appreciate them for bringing their expertise into our communities. Next, we're going to talk about financial scams, most specifically in relationship to scam artists who are out there trying to take advantage of our chronologically gifted members in community, our seniors. And today we have a legal assistance to the elderly, as well as the police department, the financial crimes unit, who is also here with us today. Next slide, please. Again, I mentioned all of the organizations. I'm not going to list all of them here today. Please make time just to connect with them. There are extraordinary nonprofits who are available at your disposal every single day that provide free resources for all of you, or low-cost resources for all of you. That's what we as government invest in, so we have that for you. Just a quick note around home ownership opportunities. The Housing Authority is here today in partnership with a Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development program that helps housing choice voucher holders or recipients begin to use those vouchers to help build up opportunities to purchase a below market rate home or other home. So there are opportunities that are out there at any level where you can begin thinking about longevity here in San Francisco or in the counties. And we want to help you do that and think about that part of your future here in San Francisco. As I mentioned, Department of Building Inspection, the District Attorney's Office, and so many other departments that are here from the state level and local level that are going to be here to support you. And please, again, do make time to talk with them in between sessions. Next slide, please. Again, as I mentioned, on the second floor, my staff is available to have those one-on-one conversations with you around any issue that you have. It's about 15 minutes that we have per person. If something's going to take longer than that, we will make time to follow up with you. We are in room 190 in City Hall. You walk through those front doors on Grove Street. You make a right, and there is the room 190. And we're very happy to answer any questions you have. If you want to call us, 311 is the easiest way to do that, so you don't have to remember some long number, but you will have them on cards and pamphlets that we are handing out as well. What will we talk about? We'll talk about property assessments with you. Any other questions, notices of assessed value that everyone should have received in July if you're a homeowner. Proposition 19, which has changed the laws that govern how property can be transferred from one generation to the next, or how those 55 years of age or older have the opportunity to transfer their factor base year value to another property, and what those conditions are based on a law, quite frankly, that was passed 2 months after the sky turned orange in the thick of the pandemic. So please do not feel embarrassed if the complexity of that proposition is something that you want to talk about, because it is so dense and so complicated. Transfers, anytime that there's a transfer of property, if you have any questions around that, homeowner's exemption, making sure that you know where to look for that line on the documents that you receive to ensure that if it's your primary place of residence, you are receiving that exemption. Little things matter. It usually means about $80 back in your pocket that you're not spending on taxes ultimately. And I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but I think everything, as we know, adds up over time, whether we're talking about the price of milk, or we're talking about the price of eggs, or we're talking about the price of gas to fill up our cars to get around this city. But I do hope you're taking public transportation as well. Business personal property for anything unsecured, and many other questions that I know so many of us have. Next slide, please. Okay. So state of California, 58 counties. I'm just going to go into a quick overview so you have a sense of how I'm connected to the state as a whole, which is why the Controller's Office is here as well. So we have 58 counties in the state of California. It is a very diverse group of counties. And all of us get together throughout the year to talk about our collective responsibilities of assessing property values, collecting transfer tax, granting exemptions if we both hold those assessor and recorder roles. The transfer tax list exists on the recorder side of my responsibilities. Exemptions that you may have, like the homeowner's exemption, those who may be veterans receive an exemption, and then also nonprofits, hospitals, and other government entities that receive those exemptions. And then the recording of countless documents, from marriage certificates to conveyances to deeds and titles. Next slide, please. If you think about the tallest place in the city that you've been to where you get a great view, and you just think about San Francisco in that way, whether you're up on Twin Peaks maybe, looking down and you can see City Hall, downtown, residential buildings, all of those come with a value, and they're represented by over 212,000 parcels. And all around the city, both the land and the improvements, the buildings, create the value that support our services here in the city and county. All overall, about $340 billion worth of assessed value. $340 billion worth of assessed value. That ends up leading to about $4 billion in contributions of actual tax resources that help fund city services, as I mentioned. $21 billion in exemptions for those entities I talked about before. And on the recorder side, as I mentioned, over 200 document types that we record, over around 100,000 documents that we record each year, about 170 million in transfer tax revenue, which is very volatile. What that means is that if the market is hot, there's more transactions, and that number goes up. It also depends on what the value of those transactions are, which can be very supportive for us in terms of dealing with certain millions of dollars that we need to help support city services. So when you go and talk to your supervisors, or you go and talk to the mayor about investments that you want them to make, $1 million can mean a lot. $250,000 can mean a lot. $50,000 can mean a lot in a community. $25,000 can mean a lot in a community. So we very much focus on our transfer tax audit program to ensure that everyone is paying their fair share. And I'm very proud of the work that the Recorder's Office does to ensure that we're following up on those issues in our partnership with the Controller's Office and the Board of Equalization to ensure that no dollars are left on the table. And that's very important to me because I know that those little dollar amounts add up, as I was mentioning before, even when we're talking about $84 million overall since we started the program. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the impact that we have, $340 billion of assessed value, $4 billion ultimately in hard cash that supports our efforts. We are the most stable and largest source of funding grounded in your property taxes that help support city services. Those are complemented by, next, our business taxes, which is why making sure our economy is continuing to work and flow and flourish and grow, especially in downtown right now, is so important for us because those dollars matter. State funding that we receive, you know about the budget cuts that are happening there as well, and that impacts those issues. But look at that number again. Property taxes comprise 36% of the overall contribution that the city needs to run. And that means services for all of us. Federal funding as well at about 7%, and of course, other local taxes. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we're in City Hall, room 190. You just step in, you look to your right, and there we are. You go to a kiosk, you press a button, there's a number there, they'll call you right up. And if you have any questions for us in our office that don't get answered here, you can always come by. Please do make use of us. We're here to help. And if you have a complaint and we're not doing our job well, we want to know that too, so we can address that. But I just want to say one thing. I've never worked in an office where people actually take the time to write thank you emails about how my staff is performing in the office. And that is extraordinarily heartwarming because I care about how we receive and perceive government. And that's another reason why we're here today. So again, we do appreciate both your criticisms because it helps us be better. And we do really, really appreciate when you're happy with our service because it helps us drive our pridefulness that we have in our work. You can always call us, as I mentioned. Here's that number I was talking about, 5596. If you don't hear from somebody who picks up the phone, I do want an email knowing that as well, because I do make spot calls to make sure people are answering the phones, but sometimes we're busy, but I want to make sure that that's not the consistent type of experience people are having. And of course, if you want to look online around a whole bunch of items, frequently asked questions that we have available, supportive videos, you can visit our website at sfassessor.org. All right, next slide, please. All right, with that, I'm going to move into this next portion of our presentation, which is about bias in private appraisals. And as I mentioned, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, equity around your equity is important. Thank you so much, Treasurer Cisneros, for joining us. We really appreciate it. And thank you for having a table for us here today. And again, any questions you have for Treasurer Cisneros or his office, he's always available as well. Equity around your equity is important to me because we know, and I'll talk about the numbers in a moment, that when it comes to Black and brown households all around the country, and also in the Bay Area, and even in San Francisco, we know that things are not always fair and that things are not always accurate. And sometimes that's grounded in biases that exist in all of us, whether we're abiding by a standard or not. And one of the things I want us to be aware of as we talk about these issues is that it's an issue that applies to all of us as homeowners as well, because there are biases that can play out in many different ways, and that's the purpose of why I want to share this presentation. Next slide, please. If you have any questions, if I could have staff raise their hands, we have staff with note cards. So if you have any questions, please do just raise your hand. Someone will come by and write it on that piece of paper that you have, a little note card that should have been on your chair. And please do write down that question. And once you have it, please raise your card and staff will come by and pick that up. At the very end, we'll answer the most common questions. Anything that we do not answer in this session, we will circle back with you to provide answers to those questions. So as I mentioned, the mission that we do is around grounded in what is fair and what is accurate. That previous slide you saw around the state of California, and all of the different counties, the 57 other counties. One of the things that I bring up every time that we meet on each of those occasions is around the issue of if we are grounded in what is fair, if we are grounded and responsible for what is accurate, then that has to apply to everyone. And I believe that even though we don't govern or oversee the private appraisal market, because we're stewards of what is fair and what is accurate, we should be involved in this conversation. It's part of the vision that we have to ensure the financial stability for all San Franciscans, to advance the principles of anti-racism, equity, integrity, and excellence in all that we do to serve you and our diverse communities and constituencies. Next slide, please. All right. So what is the step-by-step home appraisal process? Again, this is going to be a very light touch here. I'm just doing this to raise your awareness around these issues. If you have other questions around them, please do reach out to my office. Please do reach out to those who are going to be here to help answer any of your questions as well. So whether you're buying, selling, or refinancing a home, an appraisal is generally an important part of the process to determine the borrower's ability to receive a loan. Typically, the lender orders an appraisal, the appraiser performs a property walkthrough, and then shares that detailed report of the valuation with both the lender and you as the owner. The appraiser's opinion of value is very dependent on that appraiser's selection of comparable properties. Their selection of comparable properties. So many people who are savvy, who are reaching out around making note of what properties are selling for around them and are reaching out through the appeals process. I want to make sure everyone knows that's a skill that you should have to contest any value that we in our office proactively may not have caught. As I mentioned, the opinion has subjective elements that depend on the expertise of the appraiser and the appraiser's familiarity with the neighborhood. I'll say more about that a little bit later. Again, commonly expect the following aspects of the home to estimate the value: overall condition of the house, square footage, and lot size. Remember, even though these are experts, even though these are certified appraisers, you want to make sure that when they are walking around, looking at square footage, looking at lot size, that it matches. The surrounding amenities, we'll talk about that in a moment. Built-ins and additions, the location of the home, we'll talk about that in a minute, and features of the home. Next slide, please. So what is the problem that we're trying to address here? Is a bias that can exist based on race, ethnicity, national origin, and the opinion of value that's rendered by that professional appraiser. The valuation of the home reflects their opinion of a home's value, which can be shaped, as I mentioned, by a variety of subjective elements. On the individual level, appraisal bias directly impacts the value of your home. For many families, as we talked about before, your house is your most precious and important asset upon which you rely. On a systemic level, appraisal bias is a contributing factor to the widening gap in communities of color in terms of wealth generation. As I mentioned before, even here in the Bay Area, and certainly across the country for Black and brown communities. Next slide, please. So why is that fair and accuracy important in this regard? Well, if you're overvalued from a money perspective, you're paying for a home that's not supported by the market. You're going to pay for that later on. You're refinancing your loan with a high balance and you can't refinance again later on. And you want to lower those rates and you won't be able to, or sell in a lower market. And that could lead to implications such as foreclosure. That can apply to anybody, right? So in terms of overvaluation, you want to be aware of that as well, because that can impact you. There are practices that people have in terms of hiding practices of certain lending that are kind of supported by when they say, well, your home is going to be worth this much, but if the market doesn't support that, that could have implications for you down the road. Next slide, please. Again, why fair and accurate is important. Undervaluation. Undervalued home means that you're paying more for your mortgage. You're receiving less when you sell. You're paying higher interest rates, and you're less able to get access to home equity lines of credit that should be yours. So as I mentioned, both over and undervaluation, both over and under, can keep individuals, families, and communities from building wealth from home ownership. So you want to pay attention to all of these various factors. And again, it gets complicated. It's hard to keep track of. That's why we have nonprofit organizations here today that you should be connecting with to ask those basic questions. Please do not be shy if you're confused. Please do not be shy. I know it's weird. Well, sometimes when people say, oh, you're from the government and here to help, and people say, I'm good, I'd rather not talk to you, because of what we know has happened historically, even in San Francisco. But please, please do reach out to these organizations and have them help you answer those questions. Next slide, please. So here's a local example that I was talking about. A Black couple in Marin had a white friend show their home, and after they had shown the home initially as their family, with their children, their heirlooms, and their photos, and they received an appraisal price that just did not make sense. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars less than what they saw Zillow was saying their home was worth. So they said, you know what, we're going to get a different appraisal, and maybe we're going to do a different tactic that should not be the practice when it comes to fair and accurate, but it's what they pursue to test this idea. And so they whitewashed their home. Wasn't their pictures anymore. Wasn't their kids anymore. In fact, it was their white friend they had open the door and welcomed the new appraiser into the home. Lo and behold, even though they say it was the same standard practice, the same rules, the same expertise, suddenly the home went up by hundreds of thousands of dollars. When appraisers testify in Congress, they say those folks were just following the rules. There has been silence even from national organizations around this question. There has been silence even from statewide organizations around this question, which is why I'm bringing it up today, because it is an issue and it can be an issue, and it affects your ability to get what is yours, the wealth that you work so hard to achieve through the purchase of a home. They argued this was due to racial bias. Can you imagine that? They went to court. It took about 2 years, and ultimately they settled. And one of the outcomes was that the appraiser in question had to go through training around housing discrimination and had to actually watch a documentary that was made about this story. But there's more that needs to be done in terms of raising awareness around how bias in all of us, whether we intentionally, with our good intentions or not, might be succumbing to when it comes to our practices. And that can be an embarrassing and painful thing to experience when you realize that you think you're a good person and suddenly you're playing things out in a manner in which you're not consciously aware, and that impacts all of our desires to see San Francisco move forward as an equitable place. Next slide, please. So homes in Black neighborhoods, this is an example of the persistence of issues in equity. Homes in Black neighborhoods are estimated to be undervalued by $48,000 per home on average, amounting to about $162 billion in cumulative losses. San Francisco data, the home ownership rate, you can see that both API and white families do a lot better in terms of home ownership rates, 58 and 60% respectively. Conversely. And then, of course, Black home ownership rates at 35%, Latino home ownership rates at 38%. Right, so there's a lot of work to be done here, and there's a lot of reasons why these numbers are the way they are. based on the history of San Francisco, which we won't go into today, but there are so many resources that are out there. You can watch some of the videos that we've done in partnership with the San Francisco Planning and Urban Research Institute, talking about the history of redlining, the history of discrimination in neighborhoods around San Francisco, some nearby where we are right now. American homeowners by race and ethnicity, nationwide, 44% are Black households, 48% are Latino households, 74% are white households. So that San Francisco issue is a national issue. That national issue is a Bay Area and San Francisco issue. Next slide, please. 5% of home appraisers, 5% of people who are looking at those homes are people of color. Less than 1% are Black. The majority are male. That's also true of the assessors up and down the state of California. And 90% of appraisers are white. And that's certainly the case when you look at appraisers up and down the state of California as well. It's a challenge to break into the appraiser field, especially for people of color. You're not aware of the process. You're not aware of the opportunities. You sometimes might think that the bias is so prevalent that perhaps that door might never open for you. Appraisers need to have at least an associate's degree and to pass a national exam. The biggest challenge, especially for people of color, is finding a supervisor who will take them on and provide the required 1,000 hours of field training. Next slide, please. So what is some positive work that's being done nationally? President Biden, Marcia Fudge, the Director of Housing and Urban Development, together with Susan Rice, the National Security, Domestic Security Advisor, had put together what was called the PAVE program, the Property Appraisal and Valuation Equity Task Force, to outline what are the ways in which we, as city and counties and states, can be addressing this issue. Statewide, building and expanding the training pipeline for underrepresented groups to make sure that we actually are representing the communities that we serve. And then, of course, California Assembly Bill that was passed back in 2021, where appraisers are required to receive instruction in cultural competency, as well as the elimination of bias training. Not the elimination of bias training, but the elimination of bias training. Which just again shows that the feelings that many of us have and have always had about how government and the private market can treat us as people of color or people of lower classes with less money, are actually finally being reflected in laws that are being passed, which means that we're gaining traction about feelings and being validated, but we always felt and thought was true. Now there's data to support it, and now there's legislative action that's taking place as well. Obviously, there's more and more to be done. Next slide, please. I'm very proud of the San Francisco employee training program that we have, seeking to open up the doors of opportunity, trying to find ways. Ali and I talked about this a little bit. The controller's office and I talked about this a little bit about how do we come up with training programs that can help open up those doors of opportunity. We're not the size, we're not a county the size of, say, Los Angeles, which has so much more turnover in staff. So we're trying to find other ways where we can work with other city departments in the city and county so that we can have like training across fields that can perhaps break down those barriers and provide opportunities for people to come into city government through this training program and outreach work that we do, like being here today, like doing job fairs across the city when we have job openings, and again, putting a face and a name so that we look inviting, and please do come in and please do interview, and let's do some work together. And then once you're in those doors, we're making use of entry-level job positions to ensure that there's training opportunities within so people can move from division to division to division when there are availabilities. And I want to thank my staff, and I'm looking at you, Al, right now, because you've been an inspiration for me in doing this work since day one. It really does take people within the organization to support leadership backwards and forwards. Again, that's why we're here today. And this allows for a wider variety of backgrounds and expertise to enter the field, and that does matter. That does matter. It matters in terms of public service. It matters in terms of policy development. It matters in terms of the types of people and opportunities that we're trying to grow so people can make better wages, have long-term careers, and we at the Assessor-Recorder's office can support that. And that would be a great, great thing to realize. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of the tips that are out there from a variety of sources, just going back to the nuts and bolts of this. Ask the appraiser where their practice is based. Are they from, do they really understand the neighborhood where you are? Do they live in the neighborhood? Are they coming in from out of town? Are they helicoptering in? because that does matter. They're not paying attention to the intricacies of your neighborhood. We all know that experience of like, I love my neighborhood, I've been here forever, and someone comes and goes, ooh, what is this place, right? And suddenly that is applied to the value of your home when it should not be, when it should not be. So appraisers from nearby Bay Area counties may be more familiar with your neighborhood than someone else from up and down the state. Provide appraiser with list of all the remodeling you've done, all the updates you've done in the past 10 years. Some people say, just as when you're trying to show a home for sale, when that time comes, cleaning the clutter, making repairs, deep cleaning, those little things do matter. They shouldn't, but those little things do matter. Provide any sales information that you may have on nearby similar homes. So do that similar research yourself so that you not only have data backing you up when the feeling is, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right to me. Next slide, please. Post-inspection. So once they've come in and that work is done, make sure your lender gives you a full copy of the appraisal report. You want that full copy and you want to review it. Again, you're hoping that because the service is being provided, the due diligence is being done, but this is true in every field, even in government. You want to check the fine print. You want to see the work. Look at the sales comparisons that were used. They should be similar and nearby to your home. If not, read the narrative. There should be a narrative as to why they've made that determination and ask those follow-up questions. This is your home. This is your value. You're entitled to ask some questions. Look at the floor plan sketch, as I mentioned before, around square footage. Make sure it lines up. Ensure you're representative of your home, that it's representative of your home and the major dimensions that are there. If there are major errors in the report or the value appears incorrect to you, based on what we just discussed, contact the lender that assigned the appraiser to rectify the situation and tell them why. And tell them why. This is your home. This is your value. You are entitled to ask questions and ask. Next slide, please. So I want to say thank you to all of you. I hope this has been helpful, both just from an advocacy and awareness perspective, and then some of the brass tacks and questions that I want you to consider about what is out there sometimes that we all need to be aware of to advance a more equitable San Francisco, which means more money in your pocket, which means that you get what should be yours that you work so hard for as homeowners. So thank you very, very much. If we have any questions right now, I'm happy to answer a couple. Thank you. Any questions right now? Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It says, how can your office help this population of seniors with the existing supplemental taxes causing hardship for many people in my age group? And I'm aware that of the 65, but 62, that's 3 more years. Those 3-4 years and the supplemental tax.
This is a difficult question for me to answer, and it's not the answer you want to hear. It's not the answer you want to hear. I just need to be honest about that. The question is there are certain guidelines where you have additional assistance based on age, 65 years of age or older, but someone is 62, they're dealing with supplemental taxes that are being added onto their home, or the incremental rising price of the value of their home. Again, just a quick reminder. And this is the, oh, great. And this is a great reminder. Proposition 13, which was passed back in the 70s, which we talked about earlier, Rick, is what has put the cap on how much your home, your assessed value, is allowed to increase year over year. That's governed by the state, as are any exemption laws. All of that is governed by all the legislators up and down the state of California, this very rich and diverse political environment that governs those laws and rules. What Proposition 13 did was say, we're not going to reassess your home to market value every single year, which created stability for counties up and down the state, because there won't be these great fluctuations in time in terms of dollars that will be coming in based on property value. In good times, huge busts. In bad times, huge drops, right? So Proposition 13 provides the only level of protection for you as homeowners in terms of capping how much the assessed value increases year over year. Despite attempts at the state legislature, and despite many conversations, no bill has been passed to make changes to those rules. In the conversation I mentioned earlier, there are also conversations, well, why is it fair that I've been living in this home and I'm paying $3,000 annually in property taxes when someone who just moved in next door is paying $1,200, $400, $700, and they are someone who just moved in because they acquired the benefit of receiving the property from their parents as a young person with a super high income. How is that equitable? That question is being asked. The question is not being answered in legislation. In terms of payment support systems, the Treasurer and Tax Collector's Office handles those. So please do talk to their office around any plans that you need. But again, I'm not happy about the answer I have to give here. One of the questions I have here that's based on the profession of appraisers is, why are so many of appraisers white? I think it's a matter of the biases that have played out in hiring, the opportunities that were or were not presented nationwide, and also even in our counties. And I think the work that needs to be done is around supporting organizations like City College, showing faces and names that look like community members and saying, let's come on in to change those numbers. Okay, great. How do I know if my home has an accurate appraisal? In the private appraisal market, again, you want to look at those comps. You want to know exactly what people are saying the value of your home in the nearby area should be. And you want to ask the appraiser in the narrative section that I mentioned. Again, this is in the private appraisal market. You want to ask them for the narrative so you can understand if that sits with you right, based on your own research that you've done as well, and then question it. How often should I have my home appraised? That's really up to you in terms of what your needs are. Are you refinancing? Are you preparing to sell, etc.? So if you have questions around that work, please do contact some of the organizations that are here today. How do I update the 3R report info? Al, do you want to take this one?
So we have, my name's Al Barber. I'm an appraiser with City and County, San Francisco. So we have the planning office, and we also have DBI, which is the Department of Building and Inspections. And a lot of times, if you go to take out a permit and say you have a duplex, or say you have a single family home, and there's some conflicting information about the use of that property, the first thing you want to do is, of course, come to our office, the Assessor-Recorder's office, to get your building card. Okay, we have a building card for every single one of the properties in the city. And on that building card is going to tell you what the use code is, right? The original use and the class for that property. If there's a conflicting information piece, a lot of times you won't find out till you go to sell your property with a realtor. And the realtor says, hey, I have your property listed as a duplex, but it's a single family home. You know, of course, you're going to get more money for your single family home versus a duplex. So they want you to have that information corrected. So in order to correct that information, you have to visit a couple offices. One, you'd take a stop by the Department of Building and Inspections. Then, of course, you'd come to our office to get the building card. A lot of times our office is going to have the most up-to-date information because we have the building card when the property was originally produced. And we also have a history of all the permits that were placed on the property that may have impacted the use code change. So you come to our office to make that correction, and then of course we update it in our system, and then it'll show up in a variety of other systems that connect to ours. But the 3R report is important because it does impact your value, and it impacts your sale price in the future, whether if you're going for a duplex or you're going for a single family. And I just give that as an example because that's one of the most common 3R report issues that we have in our office when people go to sell.
Thank you so much, Al. This will be the last question that I answer. Some of the ones that are placed on cards are really nuanced, and I want people to be able to go up to the second floor and ask our staff about some of those questions, because it really ends up being a very, very detailed answer that needs to be provided. One of the questions that I have here is in relationship to Proposition 19, which has impacted the manner in which, as I mentioned before, how a property can transfer from one generation to the next, and what protections you can maintain in terms of that assessed value, which impacts this property taxes that you're required to pay, as well as the conditions that impact any manner in which that value can or cannot be transferred. And again, remembering that assessed value is not market value. Assessed value is not market value. They are different things entirely. Quite often, the assessed value upon change in ownership is indicative of market value because that's what was purchased. That's what the price that the home was purchased at, and therefore closely, depending on the issues, it's more or less going to be the initial factor base year value of that home that it's sold for. Then over time, over 10 years, 20 years, again, that assessed value will increase each year by no more than 2% over time. That's the assessed value. Now, we all know that the market rate of a home that was purchased 25 years ago is nowhere near the price that it is worth today. And that's why you see such a large discrepancy between the assessed value of which you're paying taxes on, and someone moves in next door and pays the market rate price, and why that person is paying less, who purchased all of those years ago, and why the person who moved in next door is suddenly paying so much more because that $250,000 house, initially when it was bought all those years ago, is now worth $1.2 million. And of course, there's going to be a difference in what the property tax obligation will be moving forward from that point in time. So again, thank you very, very much for your questions. We're going to be posting the answers to these online. So thank you again very much for providing them to us. And if you have any more for us, please do share them with us. Thank you so much. And if you need answers today, please do visit the second floor to get answers to those questions. We'll take a little break and we'll hop into the next portion of our presentation. Thank you so much. We'll just take a few minutes. So please, if you need to use a restroom, please, we'll take about 5 minutes and then we'll come right back, okay? So we'll plan to start back here at 11:20. 11:20. And the next presentation, could I have this next slide, please? The location for the next presentation will be here on the first floor. Any questions with assessor staff on the second floor, and the following presentations around investing basics. I'm sorry, everyone, I forgot to ask a question. How many of you in this room would like to hear the investing basics presentation? We're just trying to get a sense if the room upstairs is going to be big enough for us. Okay. 1, 2, 4, 6, 8. So we have about 25 people. Okay, that should work then. So then investing basics and financial scams are going to be on the third floor later on this afternoon. So actually, can we go back to that slide that talks about the times? Okay, go forward a couple of slides. We'll stop right there. So we're in room 140. Second floor is where staff are to answer your individual questions. Third floor, room 330, is where the other two presentations will be. All right. So again, most likely we will be pushing these times depending on how long the ADU conversation takes. Might be a little bit less. All right. And we'll announce that time when it's time to go. All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll come back here in about 11:22. All right, everyone, we're going to get started with the next presentation. Thank you for being patient with us. We're going a little bit over time, but we're trying to get into as much detail as we can with the time that we have. All right, so we're going to begin our next presentation where we're going to be talking about the considerations that you want to be aware of. And if I could ask everyone, I know that we're still having some conversations in the room, but if you can lower your voices just a little bit so that those can hear the conversation here. Thank you so much. Just give me one moment. All right, great. So next we're going to be talking about accessory dwelling units, ADUs. These are a way in which you as a homeowner can both complement the city's overall housing goals in providing housing and also build equity for your home as well. And perhaps put some more money in your pocket too. But I want to make sure that everyone is aware of the time considerations, the cost considerations, as well as the property tax implications that do and surprisingly do not exist and to a degree that can be negative when you're thinking about building an ADU. We had a lot of questions about ADUs. It can be very complicated, a lot of next steps. So we're going to begin with Habitat for Humanity, who is going to kick us off in our presentation around ADUs. And then we're going to move to the city's planning department, who's going to provide some more information along with the Department of Building Inspection. Afterwards, I'm going to jump back in and talk about the property tax implications at that point in time. So with that, I want to introduce Matt from Habitat for Humanity. Matt, thank you for being with us.
Assessor Torres, thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate being here. My name is Matt Rosen. I'm Chief Program Officer at Habitat for Humanity Greater San Francisco. We're based in the city of San Francisco, and we serve this city, but also the Peninsula and Marin County. I'm here with a crew of folks in the back of the room who are happy to answer your questions about Habitat for Humanity Greater San Francisco's programs. Who here has heard of Habitat for Humanity? Great. Who here knows that Habitat for Humanity does home repair work? All right, so a lot fewer of you all. I know you're here to learn about ADUs, and part of why we're here is to let you know about a home repair program that can help you make some of the repairs that you might need on your home that really allows you to be able to take a next step and build an ADU in your home. So really excited to be here and provide information about what we think is a super exciting new program that we're launching in San Francisco that can make a huge difference in terms of helping out low-income, long-time homeowners who need repairs in their homes. So let me go on to slide 3, please. Again, you all know, many of you know about Habitat for Humanity. You know that we build new homes. We actually are right about to wrap up construction of 8 new affordable homes for home ownership in San Francisco's Diamond Heights neighborhood. Take a look. It's easy to find. They're beautiful. And we're so excited to welcome 8 new low-income homeowners into those homes in the next month or two. And a number of the people who are in the back of the room are really getting ready to actually help those folks move in. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. I wanted to, now tell you about this exciting program, which again really helps prepare low-income homeowners who want to do repairs, who may be interested in ADUs. Our work is really about equity, about prioritizing low-income homeowners, particularly homeowners of color. We work in San Francisco, and we've been doing home repairs, smaller home repairs in San Francisco for over 10 years. We've got a new program, though. And that program is designed to help homeowners who have low incomes of 80% of area median income or lower. Next slide, please. The repairs that we're offering for our program are profound. And I want to read this quote to you from a homeowner that we served not too long ago. We needed a roof badly. And thank God that Habitat was able to help out. It is less stress. The roof is so expensive to repair. They upgraded the bathroom, put handrails in the shower and the restrooms. It helps a lot. They also helped me get solar panels, and we sell the energy back to PG&E and have a very low energy bill. Now we only pay 5% of our energy bill, and PG&E pays 25%. So we one of the things that happens, I'll talk more about this, is that part of when you end up working with Habitat for Humanity Greater San Francisco, you get connected to lots of other partners, partners like Legal Aid for the Elderly, or Homeownership SF, or Rebuilding Together, who might be able to help you in other ways. So next slide, please. Like I said, we've been doing home repair work in San Francisco for since 2011, and this is just some of the repairs that we've done in Bayview Hunters Point since that time. So we're really proud of that work, but there's a lot more work to do, and I'm excited to tell you about that next program. So next slide, please. So here's the opportunity. With money from the state of California's Housing and Community Development Department, we have money to make repairs of up to $75,000 per homeowner for basic, critical, essential repairs that keep homeowners in their homes, keep them dry, safe, and warm, and able to stay in their home for the long term. We're thrilled about this program because it's a really terrific financial product. It's a deferred loan. And what that means is that homeowners get a loan, but they don't have to pay that loan back for 30 years, or when they transfer the home back to the homeowners. And there's no fees and there's no interest on this loan. The other thing that we are super excited about is that we is a full service operation. If you're a low-income homeowner in San Francisco and you need a repair, we're going to help you at every single stage of the way. We're going to help you complete the application, get all of your financial documents together that's necessary to give you the loan. We're going to help you. We're going to go through your home and do a detailed scope of work. And then you don't have to select the contractors, because we are the contractor, and we work with our expert construction crews to ensure that all of the repairs are done with care and love, and also expertise, because we're working with either our staff or carefully selected subcontractors who are doing the work. The other thing, as I said, is that we'll also connect you with other resources. If you need a trust, we'll help you, we'll connect you with an organization that can help you get a trust to make sure that you're able to transfer that home easily and effectively to a loved one if you're ready to sell. Okay, the next slide, please. I've said a little bit about this, but I want to sort of reinforce the fact that we can make loans of between $25,000 and $75,000. This loan will not accrue interest. There's no fees. The payments are deferred for the life of the loan. Again, no payments. And you have to, it lasts for 30 years, or at the transfer of your home, or if you sell it. So again, it's a great product. It doesn't work for everybody. It's not going to be for all folks, but it really has benefits for many low-income homeowners. Next, please. We've got a lot of detailed information about what eligibility actually means. So if you're interested in this program, go to the back of the room, grab a flyer, grab a handout, and you'll see more about this information. Next slide. So we want to make sure that you know that these repairs, if we wish that we could give everybody their brand new kitchen or their brand new bathroom, but these are for essential repairs. The state government gives us money to make sure that we're addressing things like code violations, a leaking roof, electrical or plumbing issues, things that put a homeowner at risk of having to leave their home, or living in a really unhealthy situation, or living in a home that doesn't have heat. Our repairs are specific to that, and we're targeted at making sure that that's the kind of thing we can do. So if you are in need of a home repair in our program, please come. And if you're interested in an ADU, know that our program can help address code or permit violations that allow you to then acquire an ADU, which we know is desperately needed and also such a great source of income for homeowners in San Francisco. Next slide. I've said a little bit about what this is, but again, if you're interested in applying, we've got staff in back who can help you get started today. So please go to the back of the room and get started if you're interested. So next slide, please. I want to make sure folks have information about our team. Kimante Katika is our outreach and engagement manager who's back there. Steve Cox, our director of home preservation, is back there. They've got cards, they've got flyers, but here's our information. Please reach out to us if you need assistance. Again, if you're a low-income homeowner, you want an ADU and you need a repair to address some code violations, we're there for you too. So I hope that folks, if you're not interested in the repair, that you have an opportunity to share this resource, this really important resource, to other members, either family members or neighbors in your community, so they can take advantage of this. So thanks very much, folks. And did you want some questions? Is there questions, or we're going to move on?
Just a reminder, if you have questions, please do write them down on cards. Our staff will pick them up in the same process. We'll play it again. We'll be able to answer some questions at the end of this presentation, and those that we don't answer, we'll provide answers online after this program. So please do write your questions on the cards, and we'll take all questions at the very end. Thank you so much, ma'am. All right, and next up we have the planning department. Maggie Lausch. Is it Joe? Joe, how do I pronounce your last name? Sack. Saki, thank you. And Vincent, my name is Joaquin, so if I get people pronouncing my name wrong all the time, so that's why I'm asking. So thank you. Saki, Joe Saki, and Vincent Page. Yes? All right, come on up. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Vincent Page. I'm a development review planner with the San Francisco Planning Department for District 6, or SOMA. My colleague Joe Sacchi is here, and he'll be presenting after me. Next slide. We're here to talk to you about ADUs because first we're going to talk about what they are, why you should have one, or reasons that some people might want one, the way to add them, and to provide you with additional resources after. Next slide. Next slide. Well, from the planning department's perspective, the main reason we want ADUs is we are in a housing crisis. We have not nearly enough homes for the number of people that live in the state. So that's our policy reason. Also, for homeowners and members of the community, ADUs are a fantastic way to add value to your home. It's a great way to have income, and a really, really helpful way to correct any violations you might have on your property. Many units were constructed without permits. ADUs and unit legalizations are a really, really good way to bring those into compliance. Next slide. Next slide. For those of you, who here knows what an ADU is? Can you raise your hand? Okay, about 50%. Okay. An accessory dwelling unit, or ADU, is another kind of dwelling unit. They have a full kitchen. They're typically independent of any other unit on the property. They can be rented to somebody legally, and you can have income from that unit. Just think of it as an apartment, or many of you probably think of like casitas or granny flats. Those are like the independent ones in the backyard. Not all ADUs are independent. Sometimes they're just part of a building. It's just another kind of dwelling unit, or even a 1,000 square foot independent building in the back of your lot. Next slide. There are many ways to add dwelling units in San Francisco. Today's presentation is primarily about ADUs. That's why we're all here. But I did, as the planning department representative, want to point out that there's other ways to add units. First of all, there is as of right. That means you have fewer units on your property than you are allowed to under the zoning. You can add a unit without any kind of advanced process, with caveats, of course. But anyway, there's a legalization program for units that were constructed without permit. It's an amnesty program. It waives certain code requirements and some fees. I'll be going over that as well. But again, in green is ADUs because that is the focus of today's presentation. Next slide. On this slide, you can see the zoning map or the current zoning map of San Francisco. In yellow are the parcels that are zoned for residential use. In red, in our financial district, those are the commercial areas. In Soma, you'll see a patchwork of colors. Those are all mixed-use districts. And the purple throughout the rest of the city, those are all of our neighborhood commercial districts. So think of like Haight-Ashbury, Taraval, Irving, all of our wonderful mixed-use neighborhood commercial districts. I'm putting this up here because we're talking about as-of-right units for just a little bit. Next slide. So if you live in a single family home, but you're zoned RH2, RH3, RM1, RM2, RM3, then you would be able technically to add a unit without over the counter. The permit could take 1 day, provided that you have a good architect and your building isn't being expanded and there isn't really any advanced construction happening. But based on your zoning, sometimes in limited cases, you can just get the unit over the counter with a good set of plans. Of course, there's a lot of agencies that have to approve it. Planning is only the first one. DBI would follow up and they probably have other comments and questions too. But just throwing it out there that zoning is one way to add a unit. Okay, next slide. How many units can you add? That depends on your zoning district. I already went over that. Are there eligibility requirements? None. If you submit a permit, you are entitled to add a unit under density. You do have to meet all planning code requirements. So the main benefit of ADUs is that they waive several local planning code requirements, like sometimes exposure, whether your unit opens onto a public right-of-way or a code-compliant rear yard, how much open space you have. These are things that the planning code requires that sometimes ADUs can waive or reduce. So if you're doing a unit under density, you have to be compliant with everything. Next slide. As-of-right units can be sold or made into a condo. ADUs generally cannot. You can use an as-of-right dwelling unit for short-term rentals. You can't Airbnb. You cannot do that with ADUs. It's another reason that homeowners sometimes prefer to do an as-of-right unit. And as-of-right units are not rent controlled. Next slide. Legalization program. Next slide, please. The legalization program, as I mentioned previously, is an amnesty program for dwelling units constructed without permit that existed and were occupied prior to January 1st, 2013. Units added after that date are not eligible for this program. The program waives certain fees and waives significant planning code requirements entirely. Exposure, open space, density, just to name a few. There is eligibility is the age of the unit, and we will also ask the rent board for records of the property to see if there was a recent owner move-in eviction or whether there were any no-fault evictions within the last 10 years. These are things that can make a property ineligible for this program. But if you do meet these requirements, you are eligible. This is a really, really good way to legalize units that were constructed without permit, and it is easier than an ADU. Next slide. Can you sell the unit? No. So it will not, if the unit was subject to rent control before, when it was constructed without permit, then it will still be subject to rent control. So if there are previous tenants of the unit that were able to file a petition with the rent board, the next occupants of the unit would be able to do the same thing. Once the unit is legalized, it cannot be expanded in square footage. It's recorded as a legal non-compliant condition on the property's title. But anyway, this program is really, really good for property owners that need to legalize a unit, and it's an old unit. It's a great program. Next slide. Now we're going to talk about ADU programs. In San Francisco, we have several of them, primarily because we were the first county in the state to start approving ADUs. So our code existed before the state made ADUs legal for the entire state of California. So we have a local program, a state program, and a hybrid program. The hybrid program only exists in San Francisco, as well as the local program is only applicable to San Francisco. The state program applies everywhere in every county. I'll be going over each program in detail. Next slide, please. But before I do that, I wanted to show you a graphic of the different kinds or examples of what ADUs can be. An ADU constructed within existing habitables or within existing space within the existing building envelope is considered a conversion ADU. Think about changing your garage into an ADU. ADUs that are partially enclosed inside of the existing building and that result in an expansion to the envelope are considered attached ADUs. ADUs that are constructed by themselves in the backyard as an independent house are considered detached. There's a fourth typology of ADU called a junior ADU. I want to point out that this does not actually have anything to do with the size of an ADU. Any ADU can be small. A standard ADU can be just 350, 400 square feet studio. It can also be 1,000 square feet, depending on the number of bedrooms and where you build it on the lot. A junior ADU is a kind of ADU that is designed to function as kind of integral and connected to the primary dwelling unit. It does not have to have a full kitchen, and it can have an internal connection between the junior ADU and the primary dwelling unit. These units are typical. We do not approve many of them because most homeowners end up electing to do a standard ADU, even if they want it to be very small. Because a junior ADU has to be owner occupied into perpetuity. So there are restrictions that make it not the most attractive to most applicants, but they are there, and we do have some of them in San Francisco. Next slide. The local ADU program is the program under the San Francisco Planning Code that has existed for a long time, and it can allow for multiple ADUs depending on how large your property is and what the zoning is. Large buildings that have 4 or more units can add unlimited ADUs. That's why you'll see sometimes large apartment buildings replace all of their garages with ADUs on the ground floor. When they do that, they are using the local program. Most properties, especially on the west side of the city that are lower density, can only have 1 ADU under this program, except for the code is recently updated to allow 1 detached ADU in the backyard and 1 in the primary structure at the front of the lot. There are eligibility requirements for this program. The planning department, if you submit a local ADU program application, will ask the rent board for records to see if there were any no-fault evictions, because if there were in the last 10 years, that can impact your eligibility for the program. Next slide, please. Under the local ADU program, you can waive certain planning code requirements, but you do have to meet exposure and open space to some degree. We can waive those requirements or reduce them, but you do have to meet them in some way. You cannot sell an ADU or a local program ADU unless it was added while the building is undergoing a mandatory seismic retrofit. This is the one caveat and one time and place that an ADU can ever be sold independently or condoed out. So the vast majority of ADUs added under this program cannot be sold independently. You cannot use a local program ADU for short-term rentals, and it will be subjected to rent control if you go under the local program. So in exchange for granting the waivers from requirements like exposure and open space and allowing you to have 2 ADUs on a single family lot, the planning department does require that the units are rent controlled or subjected to the rent ordinance. That does not mean they are below market rate, but it does mean that they benefit from the benefits of the rent ordinance for those tenants. Next slide. The state ADU program is the most commonly used program for single family homeowners. This is the program that has the most waivers. They do not have to meet exposure or open space. The review is done, as with the local program ADUs, within 60 days. We will approve your application within 60 days if it is complete when you submit it. You cannot have any other existing ADUs on the property. I mean, existing legal. If you have an illegal unit, that of course does not count as an ADU, and you can make it a legal unit by filing for a building permit to make it an ADU. Next slide. You cannot sell a state program ADU. You cannot use it for short-term rentals, but it will not be subject to rent control. Next slide. The hybrid ADU program is a program that exists in state law, but it only exists in San Francisco. This program requires complete compliance with all local planning code requirements with no waivers available. And this is the program under which junior ADUs are added. And as I said previously about junior ADUs, we do not receive many applications under this program. It is, however, available and can allow you to have 2 ADUs, 1 ADU and 1 junior ADU, but you are ineligible for any waivers from planning code requirements. So most applications filed through this program end up becoming state program ADUs because there's some planning code requirement that the applicant can't meet. Next slide. Units added under the hybrid ADU program cannot be sold, cannot be used for short-term rentals, and as with the state program, they will not be subject to rent control. Next slide. The benefits of state and hybrid are ministerial streamlined review process. We, under state law and a mayoral directive, are required to review and approve these permit applications within 60 days. The burden to submit a complete application is on the applicant, so you do need to work with a good architect to prepare a complete set of plans. If everything is there, we will be able to review it very, very quickly. But state program ADUs are not subject to environmental review or to public notice. So if you expand your building to make a new ADU, you do not have to send the plans to your neighbors and they cannot appeal it to the Planning Commission. This is a very significant benefit of expanding your building with an ADU. Because any other time you expand the building in San Francisco, you do have to notify your neighbors and it can be appealed to the Planning Commission. Short interview. Yes, there's the short. If the permit is appealed to the Board of Appeals, there is a shortened appeal window, and the city is prohibited from requiring that the units added under the state or hybrid programs are rent controlled. Next slide. Additional benefits of state non-hybrid ADUs that I went over these previously several times, but you waive exposure, open space, and rear yard requirements. So if you have an existing building and you want to add an ADU behind your garage but still keep your garage, it is often difficult to meet the planning code requirement for exposure because the rear yard will typically not be large enough to have sufficient light and air for the unit. If you do this as an ADU, you can waive that requirement completely. That's the benefit of the state program. Open space, you don't have to worry about the square footage that you have in your rear yard, and you can expand into the required rear yard setback, which for most single family homes is 30% of the lot depth as measured from the rear lot line. Yes, the vast majority of ADU projects for single family homes are state ADUs. Next slide. And I will hand it off to my colleague, Joe.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Joe Sacchi. I'm also a development review planner, actually in this district, District 7 and 11. I'm here to talk about the process. Next slide, please. Because you may have heard about all these ADUs and think, I really want to do this, but you want to know how much it will cost and how long it will take. And the short answer is it depends. It's hard to provide a precise estimate, but we can provide some general guidance. So from the time that you begin preparing, so say you leave today and say, I want to add an ADU, what are my next steps? From now until construction, we estimate it will take about 18 months. And that is partially because you need to find a designer to draw the plans unless you yourself happen to be a designer. And that can be very helpful because, as my colleague Vincent just ran through, there are a lot of rules. There are a lot of different ADU types, and working with an architect or other designer who's familiar with those rules can really make the process simpler for you. So the city does not have a specific recommendations for vendors or contractors, but just some questions to think about when you're engaging a design professional. Have they worked in San Francisco before? Do they understand the building permit process? And have they worked on ADUs specifically before? So just some things to think through. And that contributes towards the total cost. The estimated cost of construction that we have listed here is $125,000 for materials and labor to actually create the unit. But that doesn't count the design services fees, which we estimate to be about 6 to 9% of the total construction costs. And then the city, or excuse me. So the design service fees are about 10%. The city fees are between 6 to 9%. ADU projects do benefit from some waivers from, for example, the planning code impact fees. So it can be cheaper than other types of projects, but it sort of does depend. And just to loop back on what my colleague Vincent was saying, the city will review ADU applications within 60 days of receiving a complete application. But if we have plan review comments, the clock effectively stops on that 60 days. So if we say you need to fix X, Y, and Z, it depends on how long it will take the architect to get back to us with revisions and things like that. So just something else to consider. So I don't mean to focus so much on the design professional, but it does have an impact on how long the process takes. And just finally, the process is complex. We understand there's a lot of information. So review the instructions carefully and please ask us questions. I'll mention some of the resources a little later. Next slide, please. So the next slides are basically walking through information that we have online. We have a kind of flow chart for what the steps to add an ADU are. So as a first step is the preparation, sort of like I was just talking about, trying to decide what type of ADU is right for you, finding a designer, getting the plans ready to submit. When you are ready to submit, that's done fully online. The ADU, both application process and issuance process is done online. So in many cases, that makes it simpler. But again, technology can be frustrating. So sometimes it makes it more frustrating. And then after the application is submitted, we'll review, make sure we have all the forms we need, plans we need. And then we will ask for the first permit fee. Next slide, please. And in that point, it's in the city's hands. So that's when you enter the plan review process. So the planning department is only one of the agencies that reviews ADU applications. You'll also be working with plan reviewers from the building department, fire department, public works, and a few others. But planning is kind of the go-to, I think, for which type of ADU program to use, where can it be located, things like that. And so, like I said, we'll review it within 60 days, but it does depend on the quality of the originally submitted materials and how long it takes for revisions to come back. And we estimate that takes between one to 3 months, kind of with that revision kind of question baked in. Next slide, please. And so then once all the different plan reviewing agencies have looked at the plan, said the planning department has said it meets the planning code, building department has said it meets the building code, you'll be ready for what's called permit issuance. There are different permit types. You can either apply for a site permit, a full permit. I think I'll let DBI talk about that if they want. But if you apply as a full permit, and you've paid the application fees, you'll get what's called the construction document, and you'll be ready to begin work on the ADU, which is the next step. Next slide, please. So then you start construction, have the work done. There are different inspection processes. Again, that falls under the building department a bit more, so I can't advise completely. But the city will review just to make sure the work was done according to what's on the plans and up to code. And then you'll have an ADU. So if you go to the next slide, please. And so just for other resources, if you flip through. So these are different ways to both get information from the planning department. So we have a specific webpage for ADUs that concentrates a lot of our different resources and provides a lot of links. Really good information, but again, recognizing there's a lot there. And then the slides that I just run through is maintained on a different website. But again, lots of good information, lots to click through. But with the caveat that there is a lot to manage, the planning department hosts what are called consultations at the Permit Center, which is located at 49 South Van Ness on the second floor. We're available for anyone to come in. Typically, we limit the conversations to about 15 minutes. If it's a slow day and there's no one else in line, we can take a little bit longer. But we're available to meet with you Monday through Friday. The hours are posted up there, and we're happy to answer any questions that come up. And then Vincent and I will also be at the table right over there during the tabling event. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joe. And again, thank you very, very much. We're going to move now to the Department of Building Inspection. Janie Chan, Manager of Technical Services. And again, if you have questions, please write them on your cards and hold them up in the air, and staff will come by and pick them up so we can answer a couple of those at the end of the presentations. Janie, thank you so much.
Hi, thanks for being here. My name is Janie, and I'm part of the Department of Building Inspections. Our department makes sure that buildings that are built are safe. And you've heard a lot from the planning department already, and I'm gonna try to speed through the things and try not to repeat anything. Next slide, please. So like I said, this presentation follows what the planning department's presentation on a lot of the different programs that are available. I'm going to highlight some of the building code considerations, dimensions, all technical stuff, exits, ventilation, unit separation, sprinklers, that kind of technical stuff. A little bit about the permitting process, but try not to repeat anything, and then I'll provide some resources. Right. So the planning department does require a screening form where you select the program that you'd like to use for your ADU addition. And so that's going to be submitted along with the building permit application documents. And depending on the program that you choose, there are some limitations, including some area limitations, number of ADUs that are allowed. But the majority of single family homes, they propose to install one ADU, which is the state program. So more technical stuff. Ceiling heights for bedrooms, living rooms, and dining rooms, the minimum ceiling height is 7'6". So if you're planning on adding an ADU to, say, your garage level, you want to make sure that you have at least that clearance. For kitchens, bathrooms, laundry rooms, that's 7 feet minimum. For room sizes, at least one of the rooms need to be 120 square feet, 70 feet minimum for any other rooms. And in any direction, the minimum width needs to be at least 7 feet. Okay, so in existing buildings where you're gonna create a studio, it will require a living room of 220 square foot minimum. And it's important to know that the California Residential Code does not really apply in San Francisco. The San Francisco Building Code does supersede the California Residential Code. Next slide, please. So not all rooms can be a bedroom. All bedrooms require an emergency escape and rescue opening that leads to the public way or a rear yard at least 50 feet, right? A lot of San Francisco lots don't have that. And so San Francisco creates this alternative where if you have at least 25 feet, you can propose a solution to have direct access from the public way so that you can be rescued if in the case of a fire. Okay. So those will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. Your designer will come up with something, put it on paper, and let us review that. Next slide, please. Exiting the ADU may require 2 exits and should not interrupt any other required exits from the other units. The units need to be separated. What we call unit separation is you have to provide 1 hour fire rated walls and ceilings between each of the units and the common area. One of the exceptions, as you heard from the planning department, is junior ADUs. They can be created within the existing conditioned space, and there can be communication between the units. Next. Natural lighting and ventilation is required for habitable rooms. One exception in San Francisco is that mechanical ventilation and artificial lighting is allowed for your kitchens, your home offices, and your media rooms. And natural light can be obtained from light courts. So a lot of, for example, some of the Sunset homes, they have a light court in the middle of the home. You can use that to obtain light if it meets some dimensional requirements, as you see here. Next slide. If you do provide a vertical addition beyond the 3rd story, sprinklers are required. And effective January 1st, 2023, the state has said that sprinklers are not required for ADUs if the primary residence did not have sprinklers to begin with. Okay, but if you're doing a vertical addition, if you're making a 3-story into a 4-story, you're still gonna have to sprinkler your home. If your ADU requires its emergency escape and rescue path to re-enter the primary dwelling or the primary building in order to reach the public way, be prepared to provide that pathway with fire rated walls and fire sprinklers, because those are the homes where you can't reach the rear to escape to rescue you rescue the residents of the ADU. And so that pathway is very important to protect. Next slide, please. Normally, if you have more than 2 units in a residential building, it's called an R2. It's a higher hazard level. And you potentially will need 2 exits for each unit, fire protected structural members or sprinklers. But with the state ADU program, effective January 1st of this year, if you have a 3rd unit that's an ADU, that will not get triggered. Okay, so you can remain in R3, a lower hazard level occupancy, and those things will not be triggered. So I don't want to repeat too much, but planning department has explained that a lot of the ADU permits, they can be submitted online. It's a very streamlined process. And we do electronic plan review process where various departments can review the permit documents concurrently. So that's very, it makes it very efficient. The cost of permit fees do depend on the cost of construction, and that cost includes the review by the various departments, permit issuance fees, school fees, inspections, when you're doing the construction. Yeah. Next slide, please. And so here are some resources. You saw the step-by-step page that Joe had shown. This is the website. It's kind of long, but it's the website to get there. It shows you step-by-step what to do, how to go through your application process. And if you have any technical questions, you can email this email address for technical code questions, things that I just talked about at first. And it is recommended to have for you to hire a design professional who knows what they're doing, and they can also walk you through the process as well. Do we have any questions?
Thank you so much, Janie. What we're going to do to help speed things up is that we're going to finish this next portion of the presentation where I talk about the property tax implications and how that plays out. We've collected all of your questions and we've given them to Planning Department and Department of Building Inspection, or we will give them to Department of Building Inspection as they come up, so that once we're done with this part of the presentation, you can go ahead and come to the table here and ask them those questions directly. And then in just a few moments, once we break, the next presentation will begin upstairs, Investing Basics. And I would just really invite everyone to stay for that if you're interested. All right, let's go ahead and move on. All right, so, how do you value new construction and how does that apply to ADUs? We'll provide an example, adding an ADU to a single family residence, some of the options that we've discussed here. And then we'll, as I mentioned, we can take some of those question and answers from our staff on the second floor if you have them, just so we can kind of keep the day moving along. Just a disclaimer, everything that I'm providing here today is not constructed as legal advice, advice, but is designed to inform you on change and assessment processes by my office. If there's any conflict here between the information provided here and legal authorities that are interpreting the assessment process, the legal authorities are what will prevail. So again, we encourage you to consult with an attorney for advice on your specific situation if that's the guidance that you need. Next slide, please. All right, so as I mentioned before, Proposition 13, real property is reassessed only when there is a change in ownership or upon completion of new construction. Upon the completion of new construction, there's a bit of a variance there that I'll go into in a couple of slides. Under California property tax law, new construction is defined in these 4 general categories. Substantial addition to land or the improvements, that includes fixtures. Any physical alteration of any improvement or a portion thereof to like new condition. Any substantial physical alteration of land which constitutes a major rehabilitation of the land or the changes, the manner in which that land is used. Any substantial physical rehabilitation, renovation or modernization of any fixture that converts it to the substantial equivalent of a new fixture on any substitution of a new fixture. If anyone wants to say that with me as fast as they can 3 times, we can do that right now. Except for CIO and CIO, I'm getting used to this too. Does anyone know what CIO might be? Change in ownership. It's clever, right? Change in ownership, CIO. NC, new construction. Property assessments cannot be increased by more than 2% annually, as I talked about before, based on the California Consumer Price Index. Let me just geek out for a second. So a couple of years ago for homeowners, you might have noticed that your assessed value only increased by 1%. That was because at that moment in time, the California Consumer Price Index was at that lower value. Even in the midst of where we are now, of what you're reading in the papers in terms of a doom loop or an AI boom loop or anything else happening at the state or local level, the California Consumer Price Index, as reported to us in December, as it is each year, was above 7%. But that 7% does not get applied to your property tax increase in assessment because Proposition 13 creates that cap of no more than 2% per year. So even though inflation is rising, we're capping that at 2% per year because of Proposition 13. All right, next slide, please. All right, this is the big question. So everyone's asking, how will this new construction impact my property taxes? What's important to remember is that you're not being adjusted to market value at large because of the construction work that you're pursuing. What the increase in your assessed value applies to is the construction itself only, which is added on in a phased manner based on the timeline of your construction. The land and existing property are generally not considered unless new work has been done to both the land and the existing primary residence. So again, if it's just about the ADU, it's not going to change the valuation of your home at large. It's specifically in relationship. Thank you so much. It's specifically in relationship to the ADU. The cost approach. So how are we valuing this? In this regard, for single-family residences, we typically use the cost approach for valuation. Again, this is as it applies to a single-family home, a single-family residence. Our office will review the value of that new construction. So how much is it going to cost? You saw on the planning department slide, what was that, about $125,000 you listed? Thank you, Vincent. Of the new construction and not necessarily the cost reported by you as a homeowner. So sometimes there's a variance there. The income approach, how much money you're going to be making off this new ADU that you're adding to a multi-use building for the purposes of income generation, as opposed to the other version, which is providing an ADU that might be for various purposes for a single family residence, where you raising or making money off the improvement is not necessarily your primary purpose for doing so. That's why it's a cost approach. Income approach would apply to larger apartment buildings. So we would use an income approach for that valuation. The market value would be based on valuation methods, again, approved by the state. These are standard practices. And may not equal the project cost as it's listed on the permit report. Again, there has to be follow-up from our office to review the actual value of those improvements. Next slide, please. All right, so here's a quick example of that. So we bought a house, my parents bought a house in San Francisco in 1990 for $275,000. Remember, I used an example of $250 before, $275 here. Current assessed value is approximately $500,000. We're just using fantasy numbers here. Right, so $275,000 plus 2% a year over 33 years, resulting in approximately $6,000 in property taxes. That house now has a market value of $1.5 million in 2023. Sorry, when I was talking about the $500,000, I was erroneously thinking that was market value. That $500,000 is accurate. That's based on, again, that increase over time, over those 33 years, 2% only capped. Maybe it might have been less at some point in there, but generally here, over year, over year, over year, your assessed value has only increased to $500,000, meaning those property taxes are at $6,000. But again, assessed value is not market value. Market value is much higher, 1.5 million. Next slide, please. So my parents want to add an ADU to that property. It costs them, in this case, $120,000 to build. There's an entrance, there's a bathroom, there's a kitchen, there's a sleeping area. Now, this component of how you have this value added is important to pay attention to. Again, there's a phased process to this because you're probably not going to complete all of this quickly all at once, although we'd like to. But in this case, the project is 40% complete in the first year after the bathroom is added. So around $50,000 of value is what's considered that at that moment in time, which is about 40% of the project. Remember, we're only talking about the project, the ADU itself. Of in-progress value will be then added at that moment in time for the property's assessed value. So you added that $50,000 worth of value. You're not done with the project yet, but when you receive that notice of assessed valuation, based on what you've filed and the valuation that we've done, $6,500 total in property tax, which means that $50,000, 40% completion of the project, only is adding that $500 to your property tax obligation. Only $500, right? So $50,000 investment thus far, 40% of the project is complete, only $500 is added to your already existing property tax obligation. So nothing's happening to the home at large. A lot of people are nervous about that. They think that there's some trick here. There is not. You are focused on the ADU, the improvement itself at that point in time, and that's the obligation that you have at this point in the project. Next slide, please. Now you're done. It took 2 years. The project is now 100% completed in the second year of that $120,000 project. And again, remember, that number might change because it might be worth $10,000 more, $5,000 more, maybe it was a little bit less if you're lucky, who knows, but that will be part of the process as well. But here, we're talking about you're done at $120K. So the assessed value before the ADU was fully added, again, $6,000. That's what you were paying in property taxes for that year. The assessed value after the ADU was then $130,000 because obviously we saw here there was a little bit of a change in the value of the construction project itself once it was completed. So it's not exactly that $120,000. But then look, your property taxes are increasing by $1,400 based on that total $130,000 value improvement that you've added to the home. So you're only seeing that additional $1,400 in property taxes that's due in those two phased installment payments that happen throughout the year. And again, that market value of the home is still $1.63 million. Next slide, please. In progress new construction. So the property is appraised at its full value every year until the date of completion. Say it takes longer than 2 years. That notice provides that temporary value at that moment of time. Construction is complete. The entire portion of the property, which is newly constructed, shall be reappraised at its full value, not market value, at its full value. Our office mails out the notice of assessed valuation. Again, you receive that at the end of July usually with a new base year value. Next slide, please. Now, this is where it gets really confusing. I'm not going to go too much into this, but if you have questions about this thing called an escape or a supplemental notice that you might receive in the mail, that gets very confusing very fast. It is not a trick. It is not an error. If you receive more than one, do not hesitate. Do not hesitate to reach out to our office so we can walk you through that process based on your specific situation. It's just a complicated formula in relationship to why we have to catch up in time. It's based on how much time we have to work through these issues every year, and which impacts when you receive that notice. It's a pain. I'm embarrassed to have to say that this is what our office does sometimes. It's a pain. It's confusing. It feels like a burden. Just call us and we can work that through with you so you understand what it is. It's not a mistake. The supplemental assessment reflects that difference between the prior assessed value for the year in which the improvement was completed before you added the ADU, and then that new assessment after you've added the ADU or completed the project. That noticing, so for example, you might complete that project in August. Then you'd be looking at September, October, November, December of that period of time in which there's going to be some more money that you owe based on that $1,400 increase that you'll see in future years. Because of the completion of the project itself, but because there's a portion of the year in which we have to consider that change in value to the home, the assessed value of the home. That's why there has to be this supplemental that's sent out. So this notice includes the existing assessed value, what we talked about before, the supplemental value of the new construction, and the new base year value. And that supplemental is in addition to what you'll receive as part of the normal cycle. So again, I know it's very confusing. It is for me even explaining it sometimes. So I hope that's somewhat clear. Just know that you may get a supplemental. I mean, you will get a supplemental. You might get more than one just based on the timeline in which the project lines up in the calendar year and our business year in terms of how we're doing our work. So please, and the fiscal year, so please do call us and reach out to us and we can answer those questions for you. All right, next slide, please. We have fact sheets that we're handing out at our is our table inside or outside? Great. We have these hard copy versions for you that include frequently asked questions around ADUs from a property tax perspective. And we also have this information available online for you as well. And again, any questions you have, make use of us. And again, if you don't receive a person when you call, please let me know that too. In addition to that, as we talked about before, there are also considerations around PUC. Do you have the right infrastructure from a utility perspective in place to serve the plumbing needs, the water needs, the sewage needs of your improvement? You're going to want to reach out to the SFPUC to discuss that, what those additional costs might be around utilities as well. In addition to PG&E, walk in first room on your right after you go through security. We're right there and ready to serve you. And then again, where you can find those sheets online is sfassessor.org. With that, I think we'll close just so we can start catching up. Everyone have a break and we can do the next presentation, Investing Basics.
Listen, let's think about this. The world of investing can be very complicated, right? And now can we switch to slide 2?
There we go.
Next one, please. This visual right here just shows like, how confusing menu of various investment vehicles can be. See there's a lot of things to choose from, and it can be quite confusing. Stocks, ETFs, mutual funds. There's so many different considerations that go into this, and it can be very overwhelming, and it's something that I think to some extent that a lot of people don't as firmly understand as how we can incorporate
recording in progress
into the sort of like their retirement plans and their investment portfolios. And so if I think about one common theme though, if I think about what's really important about investing, are like 3 main principles. So actually here's a question. Let's take a poll here. Like, who is familiar with diversification? How about compounding? How about tax awareness and understanding how to sort of like navigate the myriad of various tax rules and regulations? It's these are all considerations I think that go into sort of like constructing and putting together a tax efficient retirement account. And those 3 main points are something that we really want to emphasize. The power of compounding is very important. We want people to invest early and often. 2, diversification is very important. Think about this. It's like sometimes people think about investing like choosing the stock, finding a needle in a haystack. Whereas like our preferential approach, and if I were to sort of describe how we think about should be, you want to just own the haystack, just so you have a chance to find it. You just be diversified and not miss out on opportunity. And 3, like the really important thing about the tax considerations. Taxes are something that is part of our daily lives. It's a obligation that we have for society into our to help fund these various government programs that we have and some other things. But with respect to that, it's also something which it's good to be aware of this. Just that with respect to sort of like giving you the best chance for like compounding the work. You want your sort of investment account to be as high as possible. So the taxes is something where you can sort of mitigate tax and costs. You keep more value into your accounts. It's just better for you. So with the topic compounding, Alex, please switch to slide 19. Sorry, slide 9. This chart right here is just illustrative how we sort of view long-term investing and the importance of that concept, invest early and often. What we see here is like a bar charts of value within a hypothetical investment account, assuming you invest $300 a month until age 65 across a variety of different time frames. For instance, on the left-hand side, that's an example of somebody who's of age 50 and who has 15 years to retirement. He's putting in approximately $50,000 in after 15 years, assuming 3% annual return. The value of that account is $100,000. On the flip side, we take our younger investor who started at age 25. He's had 40 years worth of investing, 40 years worth of time to help with that compounding. Once again, assuming 3% return. He's simply invested about close to $150,000. But you can see how much more his account is worth after that. It's over $1 million. And it's fascinating too, if I look at the difference between like somebody who started between age 30 versus someone who started at age 25. Well, you can see what a huge difference that is. Just 5 years worth of additional compounding can increase your balance by over $300,000 in that instance. It's important. It's important to sort of like reinforce this, teach our children, teach our kids, teach everybody that is interested in this, that getting started earlier and doing it frequently is just beneficial. Were there any questions on it? Okay. So with that, so the concept of compounding is, it's a concept we understand. But with that, the question that often comes up is, well, how do I actually do that? What sort of, what's the process, the mechanism to which I can actually create an account and choose from, and what would be best for me? So here, this is what we want to focus on, is like there are three main types of investment accounts that could be available for you. Now, please switch it over to slide 19. These are the three main the types of investment accounts that we tend to think about in finance, personal investment. The main differentiation between all of these is tax consequences or taxability of accounts, but also the purpose, when the rationale behind it. The main one that is up there, or I should say the one at the very top, is like our traditional taxable brokerage. This is your type of account that we could sort of open up with Fidelity, Schwab, and other sort of investment advisors, to which you can simply deposit some after-tax money into this account and then use that to invest in whatever product that you want. It could be a mutual fund, it could be stocks, bonds, a variety of different products. The income and the gains are taxable, so that's a consideration. The second type is our more traditional retirement accounts. Our IRAs, which are our individual retirement accounts, and also our 401ks and our 401ks, which are employee-sponsored accounts that our corporations and state entities will offer to their employees. These accounts use before tax distributions, to which distributions in the most traditional type of account are taxable. And finally, like what we have here is like our college planning accounts with 529. So the purpose behind the use is really to fund education. We understand that the burden, if you will, of doing that loans and as somebody who had to sit down and myself, you had to say that wasn't really through college. I understand that it's something that I wish my friends would be to do, but at the same time, they were not aware. They didn't know. And so with that, only benefit of that. But that doesn't mean that we can't set up updates in our case. With this account. It uses after-tax dollars, but the concept of the withdrawal itself are not taxable. It's used for purposes of college and other sort of additional purposes. So these are the three main accounts that we're doing in detail. And any questions on that? Okay,
Sean, I'm gonna interject for a second. Does anybody need any translation?
No translation. Little trouble at hearing.
Hearing?
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll try to talk a little bit louder.
There you go.
Okay, so with that, my colleague Audrey is actually going to dive into each of these three accounts, and really, let's be interactive here. Any questions, just shout them out. We'll try to help. Okay.
So as Sean said, like the main differentiator between these three types of accounts are kind of your investment goals and the time horizon. So if you go to the next slide, for taxable brokerage account. Like this, you can kind of think of it as kind of like a savings account, like you can deposit money into it anytime you want. You can take money out of it anytime you want. The only caveat is, so if you put money into a brokerage account, so that would be opening an account at TD Ameritrade or Fidelity or something like that. And you invest in stocks, bonds. When you, like, if you earn money from any of those investments and you try to take it out, these are subject to both income and capital gains taxes. And so like the purpose of these accounts would be more to grow money, not for a specific purpose, and not for like the longer term, but like it's kind of like a place where you can just, instead of earning the normal savings account rate that's close to nothing, you can realize gains on like the market as well. And then the next slide. These are individual retirement accounts. So as the name suggests, therefore, they're an account that you can just go to your brokerage, open individually as a consumer. And they're long-term retirement focused savings, which allow you to realize different tax advantage potential. So there are limits to the contributions. I think the maximum amount is $6,500 a year. And to help incentivize like people to save for retirement, the government like provides different tax advantages. They either waive taxes for money going in or money coming out. And that depends on traditional law, which I'll go into in more detail. The contribution limit's a little higher if you're a little older, and they're also dependent on your tax bracket for withdrawals. And so we go to the next slide. This kind of details the differences between a traditional versus Roth retirement savings account. So if you're invested in a traditional account, that means your money goes in pre-tax. And so it's taken out of your paycheck, it goes into the retirement account. And after, like at retirement, they're subject to taxes when you withdraw the money. And the other option, Roth, is kind of the opposite, where you pay taxes on them going in. However, when you withdraw it years down the line, it is tax-free. And so kind of considering both of them, you'd have to consider your expected income bracket at either now versus the future. But for if you go to the next slide, this better illustrates like the numbers. So this is an example of a 401k that's offered by your employer, for example. The maximum contribution of these are typically higher. So assuming you contribute the maximum, which is that yellow part, the 22,000, this would be taken out of your paycheck. And so the taxes of them would be lower and put you in a lower income bracket because your total put you at a higher total take home pay. But on the right, you see for the Roth IRA, you would, because you're paying taxes on the money going to the retirement funds, you have a lower take home pay in the present, but when you withdraw, it's the opposite, where you like typically, because you don't have to pay taxes when you withdraw it, you end up with a larger portion of take home versus the former option.
Does this slide make sense? I know this, when I first saw this is a bit. So I would say that it's important to sort of think about like the tax bracket you're all currently doing right now. And then considering the future, where you want to be. And obviously you can make decisions based off of that, let's see what we do this. We'll also say that for the 401k, the data we can connect here as well, there's always, in those instances, an employee match. And that's something where I think it's really important to think about. And considering you're setting up a new government. 401k or just because of employment. It's free money from your employer, so why not? You know, and it's keep the compounds and bonus tax free as well. And so the benefits of that is something that we can't ignore. So it's for interruption. Can you speak a little louder? Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you.
Are we allowed to, each year convert our traditional IRA into a Roth IRA?
Yes, that's the conversion feature is something that is, it does mean that the what is previously pre-tax will then become taxable.
As it goes in.
Yes, that's right.
Is there a limit on how much you can convert into?
You know, that's a great question. We can,
I don't think that there is a limit, you know, but you just gotta keep in mind though, that amount that you are converting, you know, is gonna be taxed.
Yeah.
And so that can bring you into a higher tax bracket, you know, depending on the amount that you're moving.
But basically, once I convert from the traditional IRA into a Roth IRA, I no longer have to take it at age 72.
That's correct. Yeah, you don't have, there's no minimum distribution age. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And something I'd like to highlight, you know, so these guys actually, they work with the investments and all that. I actually come from the IT, and I've been working for financial institutions for the past 25 years in IT. And I learned a lot of the investments, you know, but like many of you here, it is hard, you know, when you're looking at all this investment, all these different vehicles and what do they do and how much you get paid and how much you have to, you know, how many fees you have to pay out, it's overwhelming. But what I'll tell you is this though, you know, the importance of starting early, you know, for me, I knew that I needed to start saving, you know, because nobody knows the future, you know, and how many here know that life can throw curveballs at you? You know, you have an accident, you lose your job, you get sick, you know, it happens to all of us, right? So in having it set aside that money that can help us out, you know, it's so important. So I think that, you know, for us parents, I tell my kids all the time, you know, I said, you know, one of them just graduated from college. And I'm like, you know, the importance that you need to start saving, you know, even if it's $50 a month, you know, but start saving. And then the importance of compound interest, you know, that it's a miracle, you know, how that works, right? And so at the end of, you know, when you're 50, you don't have to worry about, okay, I don't have anything, you know, where you're 50 years old now, what are you gonna do, right? And so it's so important for us, you know, to communicate with our kids and tell them and teach them, you know, because if we don't do that, where are they gonna learn? You know, the chances are that they might find it somewhere else too, but you know, it's important that it comes from us, you know, from somebody that they trust, somebody that they know, you know, that it's so important. So, you know, I just wanted to share that because, you know, it's like we get so caught up into the things, you know, we want to buy the latest iPhone, we want to be driving a Lamborghini or what, but we can't afford it. If we can't afford it, why would we go there? You know, and spending all that money, right? So anyways, I'm gonna let this guy continue, but I just wanted to, you know, put that out there because, you know, there's a lot of parents up here. And it's so important, you know, that we communicate like we tell them, you know, how this works. Because sometimes they see their friends, you know, having the shiny computer or the shiny car, you know, but that comes at a sacrifice, you know, and then you start taking that money and diverting it to something else that is gonna affect you down the road.
That is a great point. I think I was very lucky when, like, my parents basically like taught me to start saving at a very young age. And So when I started my job at BlackRock and like not too long ago, I knew to like take advantage of our 401k plan, max out my contribution. Because like, as Sean mentioned, like it's basically free money, but the part where they're matching your contribution. And when it compounds over time, it really does add up. I saw there were some questions.
Yes, actually, I'm interested because my case also, and then like maybe around 28.
Yeah.
And so the burden, like they are part-time job, like the take-home pay maybe not much because part-time job. And they have to study. So what's your suggestion for saving, like, like you're young and then also not, maybe for them not much, but want to have that habit and like something, incentivize them to save. Any tips, any suggestion?
Just to repeat the question, it is around when you're on a limited income, like for example, if you are a college student who's just graduated and the level of your take-home pay doesn't necessarily incentivize you to start saving. How do you encourage that younger generation to save? You can hear it from parents or others, but what are the methods of communication, narratives that help encourage people to make those savings now at whatever stage you're at? And just to, in addition to that question, just a reminder that it's never too late to begin saving. That's what it's never too late to begin saving, even though it's overwhelming.
That is true.
And just remember to just as much as possible, just to over volumize your book.
Okay. Yeah. So I will say that to answer that question. My first account I ever started was in college. I funded it with $50. Not a lot, right? But then I started building businesses and working part-time job. I went to UC Davis. I drove unit trains. I drove the bus. I was both better than my peers. And it was probably the best job I ever had. It's so fun. I really enjoyed it. Making $6.85 an hour. But every paycheck I had, like $50 or so, to have it, let's just put $50 into this. Not a whole lot. But this is around the time that we got in the 2000s. And we just saw the type of machine, so the markets were actually something that's like wasn't one lot. But then if I look back at one of the first stocks I bought, I'm using this as the anecdote, and I'm not here to give investment advice because I'm not advised to that perspective. But it's amazing over the 20 period what that balance can and so I think that even if it's just a becoming homeownership, it's still something that we can just teach and really live and each other and show them that over time, it's going to grow. And the patience aspect is probably the toughest part. Don't get that, looking back over the years and just, oversee. Even the extent we're seeing the 5-year period. Like it's amazing that it's sort of getting the twins. I'm not saying like these stuff, I'm not saying like the fire, it's tech stuff or stock in the crowd. But even in the context of just a very diverse people, like the index, the benefits can occur, and so with that, it's just like we just need to sort of reinforce that message.
I remember a financial planner explaining to me as that you pay yourself first from your paycheck, so that $50 is more. And then the rest we have to pay out.
That's a great way to put it. That's really, it's not like this money is going to circle forward to the hospital. You yourself are going to do the
So I think that's why the retirement accounts, to answer your question. So what they can do with that money is, if they have only a little bit, they're sitting aside, but they want to do that. With an IRA or a Roth IRA, you can actually put money for retirement. So that's money that you're putting away for when you're retired. That money will grow over time. So that has a cap. So I think it's like 7,500 a year. But if you already cap that, you already put away that money, then you can still open up, a brokerage account where you can actually save money there, and then when you have enough, you can buy, stocks, you can buy funds, you can invest in other ways, there's so many ways.
So that's important part to prioritization in terms of, there is a slide here that describes order, which accounts you should open first. And our preference is always to sort of think about the non-taxable accounts first, because obviously it's like our goal is to sort of mitigate our tax burden. So a lot of compounding is more important. And so that's where I guess answer your first question too, profit. Or in my way, sort of.
I have a first question. I'm thinking about my neighbor across the way, he was a kid. But I'm thinking he can't afford to buy something like my house. But so if you have money, I would think I would want to put to invest in a house. I've been to something. But then what do I do? Do I have my mom build ADUs so they can move in there so I can live in the house? So I can make money, put the money in the bank account or whatever. So cross interest,
Yeah, well, I think there's a slide on, can we pull up that slide on prioritization? I think there's a slide. It's 30 or so. Let's do this. Slide 32 out. It's 32. Yes, 32. Yeah, I mean, this is a good slide that I think we kind of help sort of hopefully describe a bit more in terms of like prioritization. Obviously it's like you have to meet the short-term goals first. Like goals, just like on a day-to-day life funding goal that. But the next step up, if we're able to meet those short-term goals, we can then think about maximizing those efficiencies. That 401k cycle. That has the employee matching. Then from there, it's like, if you think about being like high interest debt, credit card bills or anything that, or at some level, just a bit being elevated high, we probably wouldn't talk about it because like it's just a trade-off. If what you're being charged on high interest debt exceeds your expected returns of the market, saying on average, the S&P is up about 8% a year, and that's a historical average over a very long time frame. It's good to make that trade-off accessible. And then from there, it's like you think about the tax advantage contributions, like the 401k, the 529, which I think we still talk about every day, which is student plan. Then we think about the low interest debt, because your question is like the mortgage payments and things like that. When I think about low interest debt, especially when it comes to mortgages, I mean, that's in a sense a good debt, because you're using that to sort of help sort of pay for their fund of assets that could appreciate in value. So that's something to consider. And then from there, it's like, if you're at step 5, this is when you think about shooting that tax. If you're standing fidelity or Charles Schwab account, for instance, to where you just deposit out tax and savings for investment. And so that's sort of like how we do your money. I guess prioritization.
I think another thing to keep in mind is when you're investing money, right? So a lot of people, they think that they're afraid to invest, right? It's not for them. They don't understand. It's crazy. And it is crazy. It's really hard to understand. And even for people, for the professionals, it's like they never get it right. I mean, they don't always get it right. And so what's important to remember is that if you put money in the bank, and you're like, okay, you know what, I'm just gonna leave it there because I know that I'm not gonna lose any money. Well, not really. You're losing money because inflation is taking 4% of that money that is sitting there in the bank. And how much is the bank paying you in interest? Right? So that's why it's so important, talk to people, I think, talking and letting other people know, your concerns or what do you think. Sometimes you might go back and you listen to somebody. The internet. I mean, you can go to the internet and there's so much information out there now. You go to I use Yahoo Finance all the time. I look into it. I'm reading through it. There's the information is overwhelming. But you know what? A lot of it I'm learning. I'm learning as I go. I made a lot of mistakes investing because, I didn't know, nobody taught me what to do. Even though I work for a financial institution, nobody's telling me, but I had money that I wanted to invest. I wanted to see how this goes, and I hear the stories and people making money. I wanted to see how that happened, right? So yes, I've lost a lot of money, but I've also made some money, right? But you have to try, you have to go on in there, and then you have to be careful also with the hype, like the crypto. I mean, how many people have gotten burned with crypto, right? So that's why you have to be careful when you're investing, and you find investment vehicles that are stable, things that are, that they're not gonna fluctuate, up and down. So you want something that is more steady, right? We are not here to offer advice because that's not what we're doing. We're just sharing information with you guys. But I'm telling you, from my experience, going in and trying to buy crypto or cannabis, I got burned so bad, but what I did, I learned my lesson that I wasn't gonna go in and invest $10,000 on something that I knew that I could lose it all, right? So if you want to play with it, if you have the money for it, go for it, do it, but do it small, maybe $500, maybe $1,000, right? But don't go big, because if you lose it, then you're gonna be like, okay, well, it was just $100, it was $500, right? So we have to be careful with that, because the opportunities are there, but we just have to, sometimes greedy takes the best part of us, and that's where we make the big mistakes. So, so just something to keep in mind.
We have 2 minutes, so let's wrap up. And
Yep.
So the last kind of plan that we wanted to cover was the 529. It's a college savings plan. So this is something like my parents actually started for me, I guess, like when I was born. So I'm super grateful for that. But essentially, it's a plan where you can put in after-tax income and grow it tax deferred. And so, like we all know, like college is super expensive these days, and so there's no limit to how much you can contribute towards this type of plan. And you can put it towards normal investments like mutual funds, and kind of just see it grow over time period until your kid's ready to go to college. And I actually recently also realized that if you don't, if your kid decides not to go to college, you can always transfer it to another family member. And also you can use it on yourself if you're considering pursuing further education. So the only thing to note though about this plan is whenever you withdraw the funds, they have to be put towards qualified education expenses. So that includes not just tuition, but also like room, board, books, and things like that. So yeah, any other questions?
And somebody have 2 529 plans, and what's the maximum?
Sorry.
Yeah, can they have 2 529 accounts? No, same thing.
Oh, I'm not for the same. I think it's only per child. With it, I think it is subject to sort of max contributions as this. But I will say that 529 by this limits and potential tax credits in some instances depend on the state. Yes. So it's important to sort of understand within the state what those are.
Thanks. So I know you said those 3 reasons, but what if that's not any of the options? Did you take it out anyway?
You can, but they would be subject to penalty. And another thing is, I think most states offer some sort of 529 plan, and you actually don't have to be a resident in that state to purchase or be part of it.
Please pay close attention to your bill. And what happens is sometimes that person, not all servers, okay, so don't start giving them the eye like they did something wrong, but there are some times when those things happen. If you remember back in the old days, you used to get those carbon copies and then they ran it, and then they just handed it over. Well, they had that information on there. Now, if you look at your the tab that you get, you look at that some of the numbers are X'd out. There's a purpose for that because they saw so many scams that were run out there. But they have your card, at that moment. My sister from Hawaii.
Maui.
No, they're here. So he's for the good service. And by the way, side note, you're gonna get calls about helping the people in Maui. That's gonna be the scam. We're talking about new scam, that's gonna be the new scam. It's gonna come out really quick. They're gonna tug at your heart. All right, so these are different scams. I want you to imagine a room. And after they get your credit card number, what they're going to do is they're going to actually sell your information. They're going to sell that number to a bidder. It's not going to be here in San Francisco. It's not going to be in California. They're going to buy it wherever. They're going to put it on the dark web, and your information is going to be out there. We have this thing called the internet. We have this thing called Google. If you ever Google yourself, sometimes you'll see certain things. I highly recommend it. Don't do that. But if you do, there's called Google Alert, where actually you go to that and you see if you have ever been Googled by anybody. You have to be very specific in your information. So that is one scam. What was surprising to me is how many of you have elderly neighbors that you live next to. I had one. It was Bert, and I lived out in the Cherville. Bert was like 90-something years old, started just like that. Bert would actually be that guy there, look out the window and kind of look to see who was in our neighborhood. That's the guy that I want to take care of. That's the guy that I want to make sure. One day, I noticed that Bert was acting a little funny as they talked about this. You know, Bert, what's up? He goes, oh, I want some money. I go, oh, you don't need any money, but congratulations on the money that you won. Then he started explaining what they had asked him to do. And what they asked him to do was to go to Safeway, go inside there, buy at least $10,000 of gift cards inside there, and then all said, give them that thing. Thank God we intercepted that transaction at that. We go, Bert, that's a scam. that's a straight scam. So what they talked about earlier is we got to watch each other. We actually have to educate each other. Now, when you go into Safeway, if you notice where the gift cards are, you'll see this little, if you ever tilt your head all the way up, there's normally a little sign about this big saying, hey, if you're buying these, be advised that there could be some scams running out there. That's that big. I don't know about you, but I usually need my glasses out and I'm kind of looking up in the air. It's important that if you're standing in line next to somebody and you see that maybe possibly they're elder, or maybe even people that are not elder get scammed all the time. But if you notice that they have like 5 or 6, my approach is always, man, you got a big party to go to, or what's you got cards during Christmas time, especially during Christmas time. And they say, oh no, I was told by this. Stop them, let them know, educate them and say, hey, listen, you might be part of a scam. Now, he showed you the slides up there. They showed you the slides up there about how many of those cases get reported to us. It's the other 88% that you saw that don't want to report this. Why? Because you just been robbed. You feel embarrassed. And it's even more embarrassing when it's somebody you know, someone you love, somebody that you trust, right? We know them. That's just probably the hardest thing to know, that my own child did this to me. At the end of the day, it's all about that. So I want you to imagine a room big, just like this. There's going to be people on cell phones, there's going to be people with computers, and all of a sudden they are doing that call. Hey, I'm my favorite one for me is, hi, I'm collecting on behalf of the police department, and we really, we police officers, we really believe that they're good. And all of a sudden, the fallen officers out there, and this. My other one favorite is, hey, we have a warrant for your arrest. We're going to come get you if you don't give us the money. You can start laughing. I go, hold on, and I always like to play. I like to turn the table on. I like to play with that a little bit. So what I'm telling you, but once they get somebody on the hook, they have this, they raise their hand, everybody concentrates on you, say, okay, let's get this person rolling. And the goal is what? It's to get the money, and all of a sudden, that's a payday, that's 20 grand that they got from this person, and imagine that's one for the whole day, that's what they do, all day long. There's another thing that they touched upon with these phone calls. Do not be surprised if you get a phone call with a 415 or a local number. Don't be surprised if all of a sudden the number that you get is you recognize that number. But what you've been done, what has happened to you is you've been spoofed. There's this thing that they do. It's called spoofing. It's where I can call you and you see the phone number that pops up and it's a relative. You go, oh, this is my Aunt Mary. Okay. And you answer and go, I can't, you hear a total stranger on the phone saying, hey, you need to send the money to here or else I'm going to kill your family. And then click. And you go to panic mode. And sometimes people will tend to do is not call us and they will go ahead and send us money. Thinking that then all of a sudden you call that money, you call that phone back and you go, I have your money, they give you another phone number, but you call, say how can you call me? And all of a sudden Aaron goes, hey, how's things? Everything's good. Are you okay? I just started a phone call that you've been kidnapped. And I'll say, no, I'm right here. You want to see me? Come over, right? So again, it's back in the day when I came in, fraud was considered, it was a check, maybe a credit card, and that. But now we have we've let the devil inside us, and it's called the internet. We do it like we talked about emails, you get these emails, and all of a sudden you check these emails, you're constantly on your game. The other ones, the other scams that we normally see is basically, and this is where our bias is sitting. I know Joaquin talked about this a little bit about our bias. We think my own can't do me. My own would never do me this way. So you believe the gangster out there is going to be this guy with this hoodie mask come up to you. But then all of a sudden I coach you. We are the same. You're the back. You trust it. I go, oh my God, look, I just found this on the floor. But I can't go into the bank. Whatever it is. Okay, it's my own people. My own people who never do this to me. Let's do this thing. And the next thing you know, you've been scammed. Either it's a blessing scam, it's a romance scam. Now the romance scams, oh my God, they are literally like they said. They probably don't see the person. It's probably, I've done these cases too, where I do an operation where I actually post on to get men usually that solicit for sex work. And they think they're talking to a woman when actually they're talking to me. I'm texting them, and all of a sudden I dupe them into where they need them to come. But that's the same thing with the romance scam. The romance scam is kind of the same way. They tug up the heart. Maybe we're a little bit lonely. There's sugardaddy.com. It's a big, well-known site that some people tend to go on to, and they're looking for a companionship. But as they said right here, is when they start to change, when things start to change within your group, that's when you need to ask questions. I don't want to pry into your business, but hey, how's things going? And you talk. Real estate scams are still up there. There are still folks that actually, it is probably one of the easiest things to do, not to give it a trade out, but can you imagine also somebody says, hey, your property's been foreclosed, you go, what are you talking about? I own my property, and then all of a sudden you find out somebody went down to City Hall, did this quick change, and all of a sudden they got a loan, got all this money out, and now they say, no, this person uses as collateral, you're out. And we see those kind of cases time and time again. It doesn't matter if you're poor, it doesn't matter if you're middle class, and it doesn't matter if you're rich. These scams will be done. I've had the best of the best, thinking that they're very smart. I've had doctors, I've had lawyers, I've had politicians, I've had even my own police officers being scammed. It just happens. I can tell you right now, my specific instructions with my mom was still working. I guess that's why I still work too. And she will call me. She knows to call me when she gets that call, that suspicious call, to call me. And then she'll go, son, do you guys need money? I go, Mom, I don't need anything. I'm pretty good. Why? And she'll tell me about the phone call that she got. And I will tell her that is not a legit call. Don't call them back. Go ahead. Did they give you a number? Let me call them. I'll be more than happy to call them on your behalf. So again, let's kind of train everybody up. So I'm gonna put a phone number up here. And then if you guys need to get a hold of me, thank you for your time. I actually learned a lot here today, which is fantastic. You know, sometimes born and raised here, you think you know everything, you don't know everything. So we constantly learn. God bless you all. Thank you so much. Thank you all for your time today. I hope it was helpful. Again, please take down Tony's information, and remember, you can always reach out to our office to get more information on any of the programs here or any other questions you have around the subjects that we raised today, directly with my office or otherwise. So please do make use of us. And thank you so much for making the time today. I really appreciate it.